Om Devim Prasanam Pranasarti Hantarim Yogendra Pujam Jugadharma Patram Tam Sharadam Bhakti Vigyana Datram Daya Swarupam Pranamami Nityam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. O Sarada, propitious goddess, killer of misery and souls resigned, savior of religion in every age, by saints and sages worshipped, O mother kind, give us love and wisdom, thou. O grace incarnate, to thee we bow. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. You are welcome here into the precincts of Sharada Loka on the eve, as it were, of her birthday puja, which is Thursday. Her solar birthday and her lunar birthdays are coming up on 2 Thursdays. And this is our third class on her transmission of wisdom, which she gave to us so easily and authentically and practically and simply, really, in many regards. I'm taking her words and going deeper with them, as her great master Sri Ramakrishna would be wont to do, as also Swami Vivekananda, when he brought these great teachings to the West for us, which are now called Vedanta overall, our underground river of Atmagyan, flowing constantly, and sometimes we see it coming to the surface and then retiring away, like she did, very shy. Lajja Pattavritti Nityam Sharada Jnanadaike. Although she was one of the great transmitters of wisdom of India in this day and age, nonetheless, it wasn't an easy thing to find her. Sometimes people would, and this was after Sri Ramakrishna had passed from the body, people would go to the temple and ask the temple guards if they could see her, and the temple guards would say they hadn't seen her for months because she got up so early and went out before people were there and took her bath in the river, places where we've been to her, the place she bathed, and then went back in and did her early morning meditations, and very retiring and shy, but nonetheless destined to burst upon the scene as that great mother of the universe does whenever there's an important battle to be won against negative forces. That probably describes not only this current time, but also the entire Kali Yuga, where they say people have lost memory of their spiritual nature, all 4 quarters of it. And we may look at that in terms of 4 quarters of how to bring it back. That is, try and find her, one of her emanations or her sons and daughters, and get the mantra that they were given by her, like my teacher was, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, peace and blessings be upon him. And then use that mantra to contact her deep within, in the great inner cities, which are distinct from this unreal world of changing phenomena that we are occupying now in the physical body, and which our minds, when they are at a more superficial or surface level, tend to focus on as if it were the only reality. We call that Maya when that happens, and it gets people on a cycle of samsara, rounds of birth and death, in ignorance. Not necessarily ignorance of subjects like science or physics or math or so forth, but ignorance of the essence of things, which is really their own true nature, the Atman. So she's that purveyor of the Atman. She puts that bit of shining, resilient, undying consciousness within us before we take on a body. And it will guide us back then into the inner essence of consciousness, pure conscious awareness, we like to call it, or timeless, deathless consciousness, as our founder Lex Hixon called it. So we have had 2 classes already on her transmission, and that was only broken up by last weekend's seminar, which again was on 2 great secrets of consciousness. Some of you were there attending, and those 2 secrets were claimed to be, at one aspect, the union of Shiva and Shakti, the static and dynamic power of this ocean of consciousness we call Brahman. And the second secret was that non-dual strand weaving through all of India's teachings, sometimes referred to as Sanatana Dharma. This morning I was on the computer trying to fix a problem with a technician, and he said, "Oh, you sound like a follower of the great Sanatana Dharma." And I found out he was a Hindu man and in India, and was helping me with problems all the way over here in the United States. And he recognized right away by the way I spoke and what I was referring to on my computer that I was a devotee of Indian philosophy and religion. And I didn't tell him my gurus and all that. I just told him that I deliver classes of transmission on the Vedanta. And he said, "Well, I've been looking for a guru." I said, "Well, perhaps you found him right here on this format." So anyway, I'll probably hear back from that soul soon. In the meantime, Sanatana Dharma is that expression that is still widely used, the eternal religion of Mother India. Also could call it the Adi Daiva Vidya, the original divine wisdom that came out of the minds of great souls, like Krishna says in the Gita, of great philosophers, great seers. I am Lord Kapila. So he was one of those great souls that brought out this Adi, original, divine, Daiva, Vidya, wisdom. And again, not just the wisdom of lower sciences like Apara Vidya, but that essence, that essential wisdom called Gyanam or Atmagyan, which has to do with the identity of the apparently individualized soul with the Supreme Soul, the Jivatman with the Paramatman. Some words that we will pick up if we go to the land of Bharat, or if we learn the language of Sanskrit, which they spoke in glowing terms about the spirit back then, millennia ago, from age to age really, it's timeless. So Divine Mother is one of the contemporary teachers on the scene that is transmitting to us and keeping us current with these beautiful teachings of what we're now calling Vedanta, and also a philosophical mental yoga. I have to use the word yoga a little carefully today so we don't mistake it for outer phenomena and physical things, but for this inner wisdom, this innate wisdom that's intrinsic to the soul, homogeneous to the soul, in the soul, and indigenous to the soul. So this is the third class of that transmission after our retreat, or actually our seminar last weekend, where we were speaking about these 2 great secrets, basically Divine Mother and non-dual reality, called also Brahman or Advaita. So we want to continue on where we left off, because that seminar last weekend was hardly a break in the flow. It was a great addition to pointing and indicating and emphasizing the great boon of having a great soul like Holy Mother here. The Divine Consort of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa on one hand, and the son the mother of all the sons of which were his direct disciples, like Vivekananda and Brahmananda and others, and the mother of an entire Sangha that came after the forming of the Ramakrishna order, which is now millions strong, and she being the presiding deity there, who outlived Sri Ramakrishna by several decades. So we look to her then to make sense out of the confusion of this modern age, or this age of darkness. That word Kali can, as many Sanskrit words do, have different connotations. So one of those is darkness. That's the darkness of ignorance. And so if you have that darkness, then maybe you should call on that darkness and have it destroyed, disintegrated, so that great living light of the Divine Mother Kali will penetrate through and will awaken our consciousness. Chaitanya Ho, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. And she's the swiftest and best way to make that happen. And probably all it needs is maybe a little mantra from her, a few words from her. There is the Gyanam that she spoke about, but there's also the actual mantra of Sri Ramakrishna and of herself, which she came forward with and vouchsafed to people in India when she was living in the body. So we may look at that as one of the concomitants of Holy Mother's main teachings. To refresh your mind, I was talking about basically 5 of them, and they were karma and reincarnation, and they were the mantra and its recitation. And so far we've covered those 3 fairly well up to the point of mantra. And when we got to the fact that food needed purification, we came upon that word prasad, which most people would think of, maybe even people in India would think of today as just a physical food. And although being very careful of what you call food and how you partake of it, and what you put into your bloodstream, because one of her great sayings was, from pure food you get pure blood, and from pure blood you get pure thought. And when pure thoughts are running through the mind, then you get pure mind, and pure mind is one with Brahman. So it's this impure mind, or this distracted mind, or this dull mind, or this fragmented mind, or this imbalanced mind, or this sometimes balanced, sometimes imbalanced mind, as Father of Yoga has told us in some 5 different kinds of states of mind, that is a great problem. But 2 other states of mind are ekagra, one-pointed, and niruddha, where the mind tends to disappear. Its ego element becomes transparent, the intellect becomes so heightened and refined, the thoughts become buoyant, and then the mind itself decides, maybe I'm not a non-dual, that non-dual animal they're calling manas. Maybe I'm really the single eye that's poised right there in the center of the forehead, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. He would say, even though the eyes are in the center of the forehead, they always seem to be looking down to lower centers. So he was rather amazed when he saw that in human beings when he was alive in the 1800s. The natural tendency where the even physical eyes are placed is very high up on the human frame. So we should take that as a hint that it should be seeking inwards, upwards, more elevated. And so he likened that mind to hot air balloon. Cut off the sandbags. Hope you haven't collected any, or are not continuing to collect any, but cut them off with the knife or that sword of Mother Kali's wisdom, and watch the mind just soar naturally back to its original source. So that's what we're trying to do when we entertain the teachings of the Dharma, and when we get a mantra from a guru and use it our whole life, and penetrate deep into the meaning of it, the meaning of words being extremely important. So as I was saying, we came upon that word called prasadam, sanctified food, you might call it. So we looked at that, and let's return to that chart to pick up without a break in this flow of Holy Mother's teachings, because it is a great Mother teaching, these 4 levels of prasad. And we looked at the first one, anaprasad, to find out that there were some associated teachings with it, which would help us very much as we look at it. And you can see there an image of Divine Mother and one of her sons, and she's feeding him with this sanctified food. Oh, we would all love to be able to receive food straight from her hands. Maybe we should think of that that's what we're doing when we prepared food lovingly and in a sanctified kitchen atmosphere, and with articles that are clean and polished, and in the atmosphere of an image of her that we keep in all our kitchens in SRV, and that I've seen in various Ramakrishna order centers. So you'll have that protection from these 5 defects of food we looked at. Poor soil and nutrients, that's just the physical side. And then selfish purpose in the harvesting. The planting and the harvesting has to be done free of selfishness, selfish motives. Lack of awareness when processing has to be avoided. Impure mind while preparing the food has to be avoided. And then finally, the failure to bless and consecrate the food before you take it in. As you make sure that this is pure food that adds to pure blood, that adds to pure thought. All of that is a great spiritual science around food. That's why everyone from Sri Krishna to Sri Ramakrishna have talked about the importance of this element in life. In Sri Ramakrishna's case, he would say things like, in this yuga, man's life depends upon food. So he's talking about the Kali Yuga. So people need to make sure that they eat to live. But my teacher said in response to that, man must not just eat to live, a man must eat to live, he must not live to eat. So just to turn food into enjoyment then is going against these great teachings of purification of food. If you're taking food just for pleasure and enjoyment, and the talk around it is not sacred, then that one of these defects is present in the food will not get removed when you partake of it. So one of the wonderful things about going to India and participating in some of the sacred rituals and holy days there is how careful they are around the food that they cook and that they put into their mouth and that they set before the devotees. It's a wonderful feeling to know that that's going on as a matter of course, not just like a practice I need to do or something I need to correct in my behavior, but as a matter of course that's done, and just naturally. So we saw that otherwise this tamas and rajas can creep into the food, and we want to keep this sattvic element. So the expression sattvic food is very important and is used. And of course, Sri Krishna has said so in the Bhagavad Gita. So let's go on to the Chitta Prasad so that we make some progress on this chart and move on towards how the mantra can help purify the food of these defects. We're just mentioning them right now. So in the Chitta Prasada category, the clarity of mind. So there are 5 aids the Father of Yoga has put before us to steady the mind. Enthusiasm, courage, steadfastness, pursuit of wisdom, and service of the great ones. Mahat Seva, that's called. So there you see the Sanskrit for it. Utsaha, Sahasa, Tairya, Adhyatma Vidya, and Mahat Seva. If you have great beings like Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita talking about the sattvic element in food, or rajasic and tamasic defilement of food, and then you move on to clarity of mind and you find the Father of Yoga, Patanjali, talking about how to keep the mind steady, then these two should be put together. Basically, steady of mind, as I just mentioned, will become yours, particularly around the partaking of food and the preparing of food and the sharing of food. If these mainstays have been put into place, then the food will bring you these elements of strength, and your mind and body mechanism, your psychophysical being they call it, will be strong and resilient. It'll contribute to the, what I like to call the yogic immune system, which keeps you free of diseases and so forth. It's a matter of mention quite often that the yogi doesn't get ill very often, if ever. And they're not eating that much, and they're out living in the cold and the heat back and forth, and they're subject to many dangers without the protection of house and home and family, yet they don't seem to get sick and ill very often. So this is one of the reasons why, is because that immune system has been built up to where they are taking everything in balance, including their external food, and purifying it before it goes in, and then meditating, using the energy for food to meditate upon. Perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself in the teaching here, but this is how you would use the energy of food so that you could eat to live, not just live to eat. And there you see across the board from that teaching a further expression of Chitta Prasada in the 4 causes of distraction. So Father of Yoga, as is always his way, tells us first of the 5 positivities and then these 4 distractions that are possible. Otherwise, dukkha, dharmanyasya, anga meja jayatva, and shvasha prashvashaha may come if this food isn't taken and clarity of mind isn't achieved through the taking of pure food. Sorrow, despair, unsteadiness, and uneven breathing is as a result of a lot of that. Of course, there are other things to add in there. If you're not conscious of these rules on pure food, then you of course have nowhere else to go than to look at your own food habits, what you are taking in. Are you taking in excesses of meat? Are you taking in excesses of alcohol with your food? Or smoking a cigar at your meal and cigarettes after? And all of these kinds of bad habits that bring in definitely negative defilements into the body, and then the mind somewhere inside of it knows that these are not good for it, and so that clarity of mind is a far cry. You're probably not going to be able to achieve it in this life until you balance your appetites and you practice purification of body and senses. Body and senses, right off the start, they want you to do that. They do that with things like Kriya Shuddhi. You purify the atmosphere around you. Make sure that anything you partake of, that's not just food in the kitchen, but it's also teachings in the study and meditation in the shrine room. All of these things have to be, the atmosphere has to be pure, and that will then conduce to this clarity of mind. So those are some ways in which you can escape the negative effects so that the mind won't fall into despair or sorrow or depression, and that it will remain steady. And also, your breathing will not be erratic. There's one sign that you can see externally on people if you meet them, and you're a yoga psychologist type of person, and you have practiced and attained some level or degree of achievement of that beautiful inward yogic lifestyle. Then you can see people just by the way they breathe, by the way they're presenting themselves, and also by the way they talk, what their mind is thinking and how that comes out. Then you could assess whether or not these 4 causes of distraction are on the march inside of the mind. Another thing you can notice is the samprasad is next. So we had anaprasad. Ana means food. Chitta prasad means mind, chitta, or its thoughts basically. And then there's a clarity of one's mood too, or not. So samprasad means clarity of mood. And there's an example from the teachings. The 4 beneficial attitudes is also a beautiful teaching in the Sanatana Dharma, and sometimes it's mentioned as 5 by other teachers. But basically it's Maitri, friendship, and then Karuna, mercy. A lot of us know that word Karuna. Sometimes defined as compassion. And then mudita, positivity. And upekshanam, equilibrium or indifference to negativities and changes all the time. Those 4 beneficial attitudes come upon a person, then you can be very sure that this person is exponent of and possessor of clarity of mood, that their moods are always good. We, of course, saw this in our own founder, Lex Hickson, founder of SRV Associations, because his moods were always so positive. He had that positivity called mudita fully in him, and then that indifference that is listed as number 4, he also hardly thought of anything negative. And when it came up, it was so easy for him to disperse it from the mind. And so, again, just like we were talking about at satsang yesterday, like a hot knife through butter, these souls who have these prasadams in hand, then they move through the world with ease, swiftly, and dispel all darkness, not only in themselves, which they've already done, but in others as well. So, going along with our positive and negative side of the chart here, in terms of clarity of mind, there are 4 deadly traps that are also to be avoided. Shoka, grief; udvega, guilt; vishada, depression; and vibranti, lack of self-worth. So these have been talked about. In fact, they even came up in questions in satsang again yesterday, Saturday, talking about how guilt gets in and unnecessarily ruins the even-mindedness of a person who should be thinking about watering the flowers, not the weeds, as we talked about. That's another one of those great Sanskrit words called pratipakshabhavanam. So a nice 7-syllable word there, which is loaded with great teachings for us to contemplate. That brings us to, as we go through these swiftly, adhyatma prasad. So that's clarity of spirit. One of the things that Sanatana Dharma or Indians' philosophies, there are different darshanas, are very well known for, are these numbered systems, and showing how many different levels the human being possesses and how they need to be tended. So we've already looking here at the physical, then we looked at the mental, and then we looked at the psychological, as it were, with the mood. Now we're looking at the spiritual. So one of the remarkable things that comes forward is that there is such a thing as a spiritual side of your being, and most people are not tending that because they probably don't believe in it or believe in themselves that maybe something so wonderful as spirituality can exist, and possibly also things like conventional religion have rather taken their place. I remember my teacher saying that when he said the guru is not popular because the church has taken its place. He was talking about in the West when he came here. So he wanted to back to this, what they did in India, how he got his degree of enlightenment was that he went to his guru and asked the teachings. He didn't go to the Brahmin priest in the temples who were busy doing the rituals. He went to a guru, and that guru asked the questions of the guru, like Swami Brahmananda and Swami Shardananda. He knew them both. And then Holy Mother, when he could see her, which was very rarely because I said she's very retiring, but nevertheless available when you went searching for her. So the point there being is that you had questions about the spiritual side of your being when most people around are not even acknowledging it or speaking about it or in knowledge about it. So you'd have to go to an expert in that case and find out what is this Atman within inside. Inquire about your true self, the Atman. Question about it, speak about it, roll the word over your tongue, roll the idea over your mind, and then meditate deeply upon it, and out of the depths of your divine memory will come, this knowledge will come back. Holy Mother used to say that. She said, if you want the scent of sandalwood, then you rub it. And so we're not rubbing the sandalwood of our Atman inside of us, so we're not catching any fragrance coming up from it. So the rubbing of it means to inquire about it, to think about it, to speak about it with another or with others, like in satsanga we had yesterday morning. That's an active attempt at bringing what's hidden to the surface. Because the Upanishads have told us, like oil and sesame seeds, like golden rivers. You know, one has to be, you have to get a bunch of seeds and press it. You'd have to invent a press, and then you'd have to get a few drops of oil, find out how tasty and nutritious it was, and then go about farming a whole field of sesame. In gold's case, you'd have to go to different rivers and find out where the vein is and how pieces of it are breaking off, entering into the stream of the river and panning it, until finally you found that one river where there was traces of it, and then you began looking deeper at that point. So these ways of searching for what is hidden are very well known in India and highly recommended for those who do want to know something about the spiritual side of their being. So if you talk about Adhyatma Prasad, then you see here, again, in the positive and negative presentation I'm giving it, based a lot upon what Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother told us when they were in the body, that there are three conditions of true detachment. Spiritual attainment is one, so you've got to get some of that under your belt. Freedom from afflictions, because those are always playing back into those deadly traps we just talked about above. You don't want your mind to be in grief. It's a great trap. You don't want it to feel guilt. You don't want depression to come upon you. So you have to make sure that you're free of the causes of those afflictions and be able to nip them in the bud when you see them rising in your mind. Why is my mind going there? Come back to the Atman. You see, and think the positive thoughts and so forth. Water the flowers. And another great concomitant of true detachment is that there is no transmigration going on. There's a lot of times that people would think that they're going to heaven or back to earth or to hell, or they're trying to escape rebirth. This plays into right now one of those points in which I'm talking about with Holy Mother's teachings, where she talked about karma and reincarnation a lot. So there's a way in which you can think about it to dismiss it, and there's a way in which you can focus on it and increase it. That means it would increase your guilt about it, it would increase your doubt around it, it would cause you depression, and of course Swami Vivekananda mentioned that. He would even go up to Hindus and talk with them and, oh sir, I've got so many karmas, I must have another 1,000 lifetimes worth of karmas, I'll never get enlightenment. And he would say right there on the spot to them, blast your karmas. You can reach enlightenment this lifetime. Why are you putting yourself under this restriction, this limitation? The karmas that you formed around yourself, you can break through them in this lifetime. And just put forth a little self-effort. Listen to a good teacher, do your sadhana, keep it up, and in one lifetime watch all of these karmas go away. So a lot of this is based on this idea that I'm being drugged from birth to death and death to birth. My soul is being drugged from birth to death and death to birth, when that's a relative law you're talking about. The Atman's unborn and it's undying. That's why we often take time out to sing that. Namachor Nashanka Name Jati Beda Pitanaiva Menaiva Mata Majanma Chidananda Rupaha Shivaham Shivoham So as Shankara sings in his Nirvana Shatkam, 5th verse, Nam Richor na Shanka Name Jati Beda. So I'm no death have I, no Richor. Why? Because I was never born. So what is birthless cannot die. And so this is an example of what you invoke to the mind ego, buddhi, chitta complex. They call that the antahakarana in Vedanta, the fourfold mind. Remember when I was in college finding out where the will came from, where the intellect was, where intelligence was, and where my thoughts came from and how they went away, and what my ego was. All four of those things were just floating around in some sort of brain that they were trying to tell me that I had, and somehow could, you didn't know the source for them, you only felt suffering from the effects of them. And you thought that thinking was the way out of wrong thinking, which it is, and then you thought that that was the end of it when you should be going towards no thinking, quelling all vibrations in your mind. So I remember finding out these facts from the Vedanta when I was in college, when I was about 19, 20 years old. And so I finally had an answer to what the mind contained and where these things were found. So this is back to this idea of the willpower in the mind, the chitti shakti, or the jnana shakti, that you can invoke in your mind. Somebody asked me to bless them today in their sleep because they were in India. So it was 2 in the morning. I have to leave. Bless me, please. And I said, yes, go into deep sleep by saying the word Shishupti. Now proclaim Jai Nidra Devi, the mother of deep sleep and samadhi. May she accompany me into my dreams and my deep sleep. May she be the primal guide, my refuge be. May she guide me from state to state, from waking to dreaming to deep sleep, and back to dreaming and to waking again, as if they were just one consciousness and she's in charge of it all. So that was the message I gave them before they fell asleep this afternoon. And they're sleeping right now, and so I hope they're feeling the presence of that blessing, which is just mere words from the Devi herself. All you need to do is repeat them and contemplate them. Well, on the negative side of clarity of spirit, we have these problems. Attachment to the 8 occult powers. Don't get me started because it's really a vast topic, but I would say to bring it forward to contemporary times is that the occult powers used to be something that were not so dangerous and were utilized by yogis without risk to their spiritual advancement. But as time went on, then people became completely attached to the occult powers and forgot the divine powers. Patanjali came forward and told us, you have yogic powers in you. These are different than the Astabala Siddhas. And so by that time, maybe 140 AD, 600 years or so after Lord Buddha had come and gone, then people were getting this teaching back again that they needed to be very careful of how they used the elements, how they approached the gods, how they sought after goods, how they became attached to pleasure, how they tried to make themselves look better than others. But these are 5 of the 8 occult powers in English that I'm just relating right now out of the 8. Domination would be the 6th, how we approach other countries, and instead of leaving them free, under the guise of we're going to make you free, and then you're going to fall under bondage to us, and we're going to take your resources and all these sub-attentions that are going on. You approach people from the standpoint that the Atman's ever free, and they just have to be reminded of that, and you're there to do it. So the power of domination and mahima, causing yourself to look great in the eyes of others, this is going on everywhere. Like the cosmetics industry, for instance, is one way of making yourself look better. You see, about invisibility, so you can walk through walls and things that that disembodied spirits do. Why should you move after a power like that? To hide from the tax people? Well, that's what people are doing all the time. They're using these old Astabhalasiddhas in new ways in this age to cover their tracks. And it ruins your spiritual life. From Krishna to Sri Ramakrishna, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Gospel of Ramakrishna, this is being said in the pages. And so it's very surprising to me to see journals come out and say, oh, here's an article on the 8 occult powers. Hurry up and use these. That's not what the illumined seers have been telling us. They tell us to stay away from them. If you saw crow droppings alongside the road, would you go collect them? That's how Sri Ramakrishna described the 8 occult powers. So you be very careful of those 8 occult powers. Like I said, you can get deep into a discussion about this and learn some new facts about it. But if you look at the way armies are moving, and military and so forth, and governments are ruling over their peoples and the peoples of other countries, you don't have to look very far to see the descent of domination and its insidious effect on beings who love power. Let's see, warmongers, I think is a good phrase for that. Heavenly existence would be the next level of obstacle to true detachment. This is Atma Prasada we're talking about. If we want clarity of spirit, we're going to have to stay free of those kinds of tendencies called powers. And we're also going to have to probably transcend this idea that if I get to heaven, I'm free, because heaven is just another realm of name and form, and you're taking another body there. My point that I try and teach about that is that you go to heaven every night when you dream. That's where heaven is. It's in your dreams. And you take on a subtle body called an angelic body when you do that. At death, you do it for a long period of time, but every night people are visiting this inner realm. It's called the Sukshma Sharira. It's called the two lower worlds, two of the lower worlds. They have many different designations for it in India, as if all along they've known that that's where heaven is. So it's not something to be sought after that you want to arrive there and stay there, because that's where your ancestors are, and your ancestors are prone to reincarnation. So middle path teachers like Krishna, Ram, Lord Buddha, and Sri Sarada Devi, they've been telling us this all along, and telling us to transcend the desire for heavenly existence and go beyond attachment to pleasure in heaven. And we've given different teachings about that in accordance to karma. You cannot work out your karma in heaven. You have to come back to earth to do that. So if you depart this body with karmas, then it's a ticket back to earth, because you have to work them out on earth in the physical body where you created them. You can't work them out in some subtle realm somewhere in a different body. They're formed in physical universe, and in a physical body they have to be dealt with there, and you have to know that they're gone so you won't fall victim to guilt or grief or lack of self-worth. You see, all those things will come creeping back because you still have karmas lurking behind somewhere, and somebody in you called a conscience knows about that. And some great teacher is pointing to them, say, haven't you taken care of those yet? It's about time you do. How old are you? 20, 30, 50, 70? Get rid of those things right now while you have the wherewithal. Holy Mother certainly gave that teaching. Everything you want to do now that's of any merit or worth, do it now before the body ages, because when the body ages, your prana will go away, and you won't have the energy to do intense practices by then. So these are all teachings came out of her mouth, and they point directly to Sanatana Dharma teachings, to Atmagyan teachings, to Dharma, and how we should take it up and practice it. So I hope that the 4 clarities of spiritual life bring some clarity into your life and into your household and into your own sacred atmosphere, so that your food, your thoughts, your moods, and your spirit will all be exalted the way she wants you to be. So let's move on to this chart. Again, graced with Holy Mother's beautiful image when she was younger. She made this wonderful statement at one time. Perhaps one practices japa and mantra in this life. In the next life, one intensifies the spiritual mood. What's that word again? Mood? Samprasad we just looked at. And in the following, advances it further. Thus, spiritual evolution goes on. The moment that one's three karmas come to an end, one realizes God. That is one's last birth. This plus the practice of spiritual discipline and time are the factors in the attainment of spiritual knowledge. So those 2 sentences or 3 sentences, when I read them, right away my mind was forming this chart so that we could look into these 3 factors in the attainment of enlightenment. Not going to be something that's extremely popular for people who are attached to the world and don't know about that adhyatma prasada yet, that they have a spiritual side to them. But once one finds out, or there's an inkling of the birth of spirituality in one has what they're calling a spiritual awakening for several different reasons. Maybe because of past good karmas, maybe because you met a guru, maybe because you had a divine memory of having practiced with a guru in another lifetime, and then all of a sudden this rubbing of sandalwood happens and you get this fragrance coming back to you, inner fragrance coming back to you, then you want to return to that path of intense practice. So that's an interest in enlightenment right there. So if she said there are 3 factors to the attainment of enlightenment, we should probably study them. So the first thing she talks about, and brings a nice end to one of the points we're calling one of her transmission teachings, is karma. So under karma, you can see her quote here: "Human being, today it is, tomorrow it is not. No one will accompany a person after death. Only action, good and bad, will follow, even after death." So how do we destroy these karmas? This is number 1 we're looking into, of these moons up here, as it were, these half moons. Let's look under the karma destruction list below at the bottom of the chart. We have to awaken to the insidious presence of Maya. That is, that name, form, time, space, and causality, the 5 aspects of Maya, tend to cover reality. And as they cover, there's also a distortion that happens to them when we come upon them, like a reflection in a pool. It can be very clear, or the wind can blow and it can be very distorted, or mud can rise or green scum can cover the lake, and therefore we would be subject to those 2 or 3 kinds of veiling and distorting powers. Maya is doing that all the time to your divine self, which is hidden back here in a 5-fold sheath, right? Body, energy, mind, thought, and ego. The 5 koshas, we call them in Vedanta. A great teaching that's specific to Vedanta, and one of the most beautiful ways of explaining to someone why they're not the body, and why they're not the mind, and why they're not the ego, why they're not the small self. It's just, well, here's the 5 koshas. Isn't it obvious that this is not yourself? This has been taught from time out of mind in India, even to children. So if you grow up with teachings like that, then you're immediately on guard against the covering power of Maya. Bodies walking around, energy flowing, thoughts of different kinds rising in the mind. So this is one way that you can actually offset karma, is by being aware that it happens in Maya, and then you can disperse it in Maya. Second, recognize the limitations of name and form in nature. If you have that desire to be free, then everyone feels that to have a body and a pair of lungs and to be held to earth by gravity and various other limitations are inherent to that condition. So that's why one meditates to get, and one brings light to the dream state, as he tries to recognize the deep sleep state. Of course, a lot of this is leading to mantra. That's what we're leaving that first: karma, reincarnation, and mantra, as we go along here in this week and next week. Third is perceive the suffering-ridden nature of relative existence. Well, that's only the first noble truth of Buddha, which I'm not making an understatement, but that's, if you're to be an authentic Buddhist, you have to recognize and accept that existence is full of suffering. And Holy Mother said that even some couple thousand years after Lord Buddha said it. He said, the suffering of this world has gotten into the very marrow of my bones, my child. So she wanted you to be, again, very careful about the insidious presence of Maya and the limitations that are placed upon you by taking on a body-mind mechanism. And that suffering was going to be a part of the quotient. We could probably say here, and she would be first one to second it, would be that pleasure is also a kind of suffering. So you can go all the way back to the Bhagavad Gita for that one. Say, what's sweet in the beginning and turns sour later, that's what you don't want, Krishna says. But what's difficult in the beginning, sour, but turns sweet later, that's sadhana leading to enlightenment. That's what you want. So never back off from the pitch or from the attempt to take that spiritual journey to its culmination, just because of a few minor difficulties at the head of the trail. Then subdue sense life by noting the dangers of pleasure and enjoyment. Really jumped ahead to that one already. Fifth, break free of the cocoon of family life and mundane human convention. So is it callous to leave your family behind like Buddha did and like Sri Rama had to do and others and thousands of swamis I know of did in this day and age? Is that callous, or is that, here, let me go and find my true self and then I'll bring back that news to you later? See, yes. We have that as the motto of the Ramakrishna order, so they make sure they avoid that problem. Is that for the realization of the self and the good of the world. So you get realization of the self first. Atmano moksharta is how they say that. Get realization of the self first. If you have to back off from others, shall we go back to the detachment teachings and show you why you have to do that? Because you'll be distracted again and again by people who are taking you away from the point of your spiritual practice when you're in the midst of people who are as themselves not yet enlightened. They're contributing to the problem, not the solution, as they say nowadays. So it's a point here we could go deep into, and it's also could be a source of early suffering for people. One of those good things is that they say, well, I'm going to have to detach from family life and from sensual life and from physical living, attachment to the world and so forth, so that I can remember who I am. Once I remember who I am, I can go amongst those very things and not suffer anymore. Shall we go back again? Show you how you have to get rid of afflictions. You see, it's all been said in a course of teachings by Holy Mother that go way back millennia, when she came on hand in this day and age, just to say them to us in simple words. We have to connect them to these ancient teachings. And then we'll just, inside of 10 minutes, you'll run into you'll run into them again. It's not like you can take a chart or one of these groups of teachings and say, okay, I got it, flip it, and go on and not connect what she's saying to what you just studied, you see. So she's already brought up two of those things here: dangers of pleasure and enjoyment, cocoon of family life, and the conventional rebirth, and breaking free of the ancestors and the chain of rebirth with them. Inspect individual thoughts and habits and connect them to actions in past lifetimes. So once you do get free of family ancestors for a period, whether you call it your morning meditation for an hour, or whether you call it a seminar I did with Babaji last weekend, or whether you call it I'm going on retreat for 3 or 4 or 5 days away from my home and putting myself just in the dharmic atmosphere with my Sangha, or whether you call it I'm going to a cave for a year, or I'm going on pilgrimage for 5 years. Whatever level you're doing it at, this is what it's going to take in order to be able to inspect your thoughts and your habits clearly and succinctly without distractions. You could be getting to the point of this practice, somebody will burst in the room and interrupt you, see, or a dinner bell will ring, or the dog will come up and want petting. See, whatever it is that happens in your household, you could get into a fairly deep state in 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours if you can do it. And right about the time when you're going to pierce through that Maya veil around that particular karma or samskara is when you'll be distracted every time. It's as if the world is set to distract you on purpose whenever you get near the light. That's like an automatic setting. That's not a devil out to get you. That's just what's going to happen when you approach the light. The world will come running. You can take my word for it, or you can read the scriptures and listen to the seers, or you can just try it yourself, and later I can laugh at you and say, ha ha, I told you so, because that's the way it is. So this is in order to be able to inspect individual thoughts and habits and connect them to the actions that brought you here. Remember what we're talking about here, just to keep this in perspective. We're talking about 3 main factors to the attainment of enlightenment that Holy Mother spoke about. The first one is karma, and this is how you destroy it. So is it that difficult to destroy your karma? Yeah, without a list like this, it's impossible. You don't even know where they come from. You don't even know you have them. People are walking around just bags of karma, cause and effect going on all over the place, and they don't know that they're even there as complexes or habits or tendencies or psychoses, or jump to the chase, samskaras in India, if you go to those loaded words of Divine Mother. So yes, get yourself a list from a great teacher like her and check it off. Check each one of these off. You know, you're doing this with me right now, so make a check in your mind with this list, and then get busy and do them after the class. Sit down and go do them. The last one there is meditate with specific aim to dissolve all mental residue that binds the mind to relativity. Just like you would have to dry off something with a heater, or you got your hair wet, so you use a blow dryer and you get it dry real quick. You see, there's residue on everything, and it's the same with your inner moods, samprasad. It's the same with your chitta prasad, the substance of your thoughts. They have a residue on them. You're going to have to dry those off, towel them off, clean them off with this inner practice, so that your mind will see that Brahman alone is real and that the world is not. Brahman satya jagad mithya. It's quick, but it's rather thorough. I think this is the first of these 3 main factors that she's talked about. Let's go on to 2. Very important one, practice. Because if you see your karmas, if you follow the way of the teachers, and you say, oh, I see I do have some karmas here. These have been getting in my way for a long time. What do I do about that? I see a list. Okay, I've taken account of the list. I know what there is to be done. Now I have to practice. So take Swami Vivekananda's word for it then. He said, there have been books written by the thousands, and there are temples by the dozens, hundreds, but for an ounce of practice, he says. He saw the temples, he saw the books, he saw the teachings in the books, but his conclusion to it all was, for an ounce of practice. If I could just see an ounce of practice in my students and some headway being made, just a little, then that would be good. I would know that you have heard the teachings and you're moving forward. So let's look at what practice entails. Her quote about it here is, through spiritual practices, the ties of past karma are cut asunder. But the realization of God cannot be achieved without ecstatic love for Him. Do you know the significance of japa, that's saying the mantra, and other spiritual practices? By these, the dominance of the sense organs is subdued. So we've seen animals completely under the dictates of their sense organs. The taste, the tongue, the nose, the smell, the eyes, the sight, a cow, a dog, an owl. However you see, whatever species of animal is there, subhuman species, is connected more to one or two of the senses than the others, and how they're fully, that attachment to some of these senses completely dictates their life without any thought otherwise of doing anything different. In the same way, human beings run the common run of things too, the common mill, and plod along in one way only until a groove is formed in the mind by which they come and go, not only from place to place, but from birth to life to death and back to rebirth. So this is being brought up here by the Holy Mother. She wants to subdue the influence of the senses and maybe increase the influence of the subtle senses, and then maybe purified senses, you see, until there's not a billion eyes looking. There's just two. Until there's not those two anymore, there's just one. The Jnana Chakshu, the eye of wisdom, you're seeing everything through that. And even that closes, and you see only Brahman. See? Let's see the list of sadhana then. It's rather short, it could be longer, but there it is. Purify the soul via worship. Krishna would concur. He said the greatest austerity of the body, what is that, according to Krishna? I've asked that to students. They said, food. Being vegetarian, eating pure food. He didn't even mention that in the Gita. The greatest of the three austerities of the body is worship. That's the first one he mentions. It says, if you can bring yourself to go into your altar after you set it up in a pure atmosphere and had a guru bless it with Ganges water, make the articles clean, make it all shine, put a candle there, light it, offer a flower, burn some incense, and bow yourself down in front of it. That's Upasana style purification. That's India. You put that together and it gets you to non-duality later. It's not idol worship. It's not just even image worship. It's worship of the reality that's in all idols and images, that is the core essence of them all. But you're just taking it on the outside and then making some premature conclusion about it. Holy Mother had something to say about that to people who thought that way. She said that millions of people have been getting their salvation through puja and worship. And you mean to take that away from them? Just because you have some sort of high-minded idea about non-duality? No, whatever the case is with you, this carpet cannot be pulled out from under the people. This is how they purify themselves. This is how culture keeps itself pure for thousands and thousands of years, beyond a 200-year America. See? So this is what you need to do. Purify the soul via worship. The soul there, by the way, is not the Atman. We have to always come back to that. The soul there is the mind. The transmigrating soul. Oh, shall we go back and see how transmigration has to be overcome? You see, we just talked about that. So the Atman never comes and goes. It never thinks. It always knows, some poet said. So it's stationary. That soul is a capital S. That's Atman or Paramatman. But this soul she's mentioning here is that one that needs to worship, needs to bow itself down, needs to purify body and senses. Why? So that guilt, lack of self-worth, grief, suffering, and all those things that we just studied won't come up in it. There are people like that, believe me. I run into them. I've seen them in my life, just totally free from worry and grief. And just naturally in the state of balance. That's yogic equipoise right there. That's sthiti pragnasya, steady in the wisdom that knows everything to be Brahman, no matter what the appearances are otherwise. All right, so the second one is strengthen body-mind via yoga. And Holy Mother herself said, Hatha yoga that attaches ones to occult powers. And we just looked at the occult powers. So she said, be better not to rely upon that. If you've already started into it and the Guru comes along and says, and I've had this experience a couple times in the last few months, should I keep on going on with my Hatha yoga and my breathing exercise? I've had to question the person. I usually come back and say, not necessarily, just diminish them. You've had the phase of asana. You've had the phase of pranayama. You've got to make it into something. Otherwise, you'll never go on to the fourth limb of purifying your consciousness. That is, getting pratyahara into your belt. You'll just be thinking all the time, asana, breathing, and your mind is still staying the same as it was. It's not got concentration yet, which is the fourth limb, pratyahara, or fifth limb. See? And then sixth limb concentration, then seventh limb meditation. What about those limbs? You're never going to come to them because you're just attached to body and breath? You've done that. And there's this person who asked me this a few weeks ago, had been doing it for 40 years. I said, good Lord, man, I can, without any reticence whatsoever, I can tell you, you're done with that. You've completed it. And why, now you're asking a guru about it. I said, should I give it up? And, yes, you should go on, because I'm teaching him the 8-limb yoga. I said, yes, you should go on to the next limbs. You could have done that in year 2, maybe sooner. Climb the tree, get to the top, have the view. You can go back and get in an asana later if you want to, if it's so important to you. So strengthen the body-mind via yoga. Yoga means 8-limb yoga, Ashtanga yoga, Raja yoga. And consummate it, culminate the thing, arrive. Don't just descend, you see. It's like going into San Francisco on a foggy day, right? Remember that. People clutching fingernails, digging into their arms. That's where you see them all cut all the time. People are digging their fingernails into those padded arms that they've got in their little tiny chairs they cram you into. So down you come, you see, and you don't know where the ground is. The pilot doesn't even know. He's remaining strangely silent for the whole 20 minutes of hell that it's taken all the people in that plane to, so that bump finally happens, you see. So that's what taking up yoga and never arriving at the higher limbs is like. And get through that phase. Land. Ground yourself. And when you do, then hone the intellect via study, because that's the next level that people need to take up. We're talking about kind of a summation of the second factor that Holy Mother talks about in her experience of seeing us in this world in the 18 and 1900s. In terms of this great supreme goal called attaining enlightenment, the paragatam, not the lesser goals. the paragatam, the supreme goal. She's talking about a sadhana that's well-rounded, a 4-yoga type of sadhana. Probably going to be the name of our next retreat, by the way. 4-yoga living, or something like that. You see, we're gonna round it all out and show us how to be completely well-rounded Purna yogis and yoginis. So hone the intellect via study. No, not worldly study. No, not just secular study. No, not just the aparavidya and subjects that make a living and that take the mind away from your divine nature as you entertain them. The study that brings you right close to Brahman actually brings you right close to Divine Mother, because she loves that jnanam. She loves words. You might have noticed. She's Vakdevi, the goddess of the word. Vani Saraswati Vakdevi Bhagavati Parvati Mampahi Veena Hamsa Hamsavahi Vedanta Rupini Bolayamam Vani Saraswati Vagdevi Bhagavati Parvati Mampahi. She loves words. She's in every word. The wisdom that is hers is impacted into every particle of every letter of every alphabet, in every language, in every world. That's how the word proceeds in 4 ways. We'll get to that probably next week. 4 levels of the mantra here we'll look at, and how that goes deep, and how it comes out, and how it returns. So, of course, this is your study of the word. Then practice japa of the holy mantra. It works by repetition. It's not something that you can just say once and be done with. That's not the way it does its work. You repeat it and it brings back hidden memories of pure divine nature. Nothing else does it that quickly as the mantra. And then, since you started out purifying the soul via worship, finally come to realize that God has form. Because somewhere along the way, somebody probably told you that form is unreal, and that has to be assessed correctly in the mind, because it's true. It's all vibrating particles changing at a billionth of a second. What's in it but emptiness, ultimately? But perceiving God with form means there's an essence that's this. It's the essence of a thing. The thing might be without substance, but it's not without essence. So that essence is what you concentrate on when you did the mantra, the essence of the mantra, when you memorized the scriptures, when you meditated upon Brahman. That's the essence in all those things that you consist of and that you're meditating upon. O meditator, become the goddess. She is your essence. Ram Prasad has that beautiful line in one of his songs. O meditator, become the goddess. She is your essence. So why are you sitting there meditating somewhere out there, in there, left, right, up, down, on any particular thing? Meditate on yourself as the meditator, as the goddess herself doing the meditation, and come quickly to this consummate view of non-duality. Strike away karma vinasha we just looked at. Strike away all those karmas in a thrice and perceive God existing everywhere and in everything. Then finally realize the formless Brahman in the final step. That was the penultimate step, so that you could hear Sri Ramakrishna's meaning when he said, God is with form, God is also beyond form, and God is beyond both form and formlessness as well. So there's always much, much deeper place to go with it all. Do you like it? How to destroy the karma by doing a sadhana. And then what about this third factor called time? She says about that, that it's one of the main factors, but here's the list under the word kala. And it's very precious because this is a kind of mental sadhana that you're doing as you're doing these other forms of sadhana. The first one's very important. Recall life's true purpose. So you could sit down with a great guru, just wander out of the West and see Ramana Maharshi sitting unknown somewhere, on a mountain in the tropics, and sit down there and hear him say, who are you? And all of a sudden start into this like upper track of realization that he's at, when you're just a Westerner that came over there not even in the know of what you were searching for. Or you could instead sit down on your own and take yourself to task, as many people are doing and have done. This is meaningless. I'm not getting anywhere. I don't feel fulfillment. I've lost my peace of mind. And all of these things don't attract me anymore. Family, spouse, work. Sometimes I feel good about them, other times I could just be without them. It'd be better to be without them. So what is the meaning in all this flux? You see, this Mayic flux. Should we go back and find out that name and form and time and space and cause and effect are always changing places and changing faces, and that you're the one caught up in it. See? And you need to free yourself from it. So you would sit yourself down and try and recall the true purpose for your life. What is it that has ever made you truly happy in your life? When was that moment, or what was that time, or which lifetime was it in which you felt fulfilled, and how did you lose that balance, that yogic equipoise? Because when you get back into sattva, it feels like you've got it back. But then Rajas and Tamas come along, steal the sattva away, and then you're left in the lurch again. See, why is that happening to me? I want to be steady in not only sattva, because I see that comes and goes, but sattva shuddha, pure sattva, which has to do with this practice over here of the 4 yogas. That's how you keep yourself in sattva shuddha. You don't just, oh, thank God I feel better today, and then the next day you're not feeling so good again. When you do feel better, you say, while I'm feeling good, I need to purify and refine this sattvic balance and take it and use it to study the scriptures, use it to meditate, use it to serve others selflessly, use it to do my mantra practice, use it to put some attention on God with form and meditate upon the formless reality. Write down the list, checking them off, as I said. And then you just spent the last half hour finding the true meaning of life again. It's yours. Why did you ever lose it? And don't ever lose it again. See? And if you want to drive that deeper into your memory, go on retreat and pilgrimage. Those are important things to do, as she said, when you're young. Seek out a spiritual path. Find an adept guru. And with the help of the path and the guru, select an ishtam. That's called your chosen ideal. Select an ishtam. And take final refuge in that ishtam. You've already contemplated that God has form and also is beyond form. So you know that there's no guilt or remorse or grief in loving both God with form and God without form. What is that God? I'm not sure what it is. Do you know? No, I don't know, but I know I love it. That's a conversation I had with a person 30 years ago. What is that God? Where is it? And so forth. Do you know? No, I don't know, but I know that I love it. That was what the person said to me. So there's that inner attachment to the Lord that persists through all of this experiences, empty experiences that you're having in the worlds of name and form and time and space, and their recompense called karma, cause and effect. fulfill all desires in that Dharma. So once you find that Dharma and you're balanced, you have a right, a divine right, to go ahead and fulfill everything that couldn't be fulfilled before because you didn't know the meaning of life. When you find the meaning of life is Dharma, is Jnanam, is enlightenment, as she's talking about here, go back to your wife, go back to your sons and daughters, go back to your mothers and fathers, and tell them, arise awake, stop not till the goal is reached. I have found the truth. I have found the truth. It's in the Vedanta of India. It's in the yoga. It's in the ancient divine wisdom, and it will never go away. It's ageless. So a quick list of what happens in time. How to use your time best of all. So we might want to repeat that quote at the end of this chart. Perhaps one practices japa and austerity in this life. In the next life, one intensifies the spiritual mood, and in the following advances it further. Thus spiritual evolution goes on. The moment that one's karmas come to an end, one realizes God. That is one's last birth. This, plus the practice of spiritual discipline and time, are the factors to the attainment of spiritual knowledge. So, precious words of just a few sentences of which I thought about in conjunction with her beautiful form and her existence in the body and the life of my Guru, and how he passed on all of her wisdom and the mantra she gave them to us. And we helped found SRV with it. So here we can salute the Divine Mother of the Universe with all deep love and move on towards next week's class. And here with this beautiful offering to her. Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada, Jaya Swami Vivekananda, Jayananda Ki Jai, Turiyananda Yogananda, Om Kali Ma, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada, Jaya Swami Vivekananda, Brahmananda Ki Jai, Turiyananda Yogananda, Om Kali Ma, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada, Jai Sri Ramakrishna, Om Sharada. Om Jananim Charadam Demim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Choye Shritva Pranamami Muhur Mahu. O Ramakrishna, teacher of all, Sharada, goddess divine, in bosom holding those lotus feet. Salutations to both ever be of mine. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat.